Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, June 30th, the last day of the month, and our last day for fun. We're going to do something a little different than our normal series. We are going, ouch, dropped something, sorry about that. Dropped the remote to the TV. Anyway, we are going to do a little experiment of on and off axis throwing with a commonly used dice set, a 3V set, 3, 2, 3, 6. I'm going to set this off over here. I'm going to have two trays, one on the left and one on the right. We're going to have two different colored dice, which is why we have two trays. I'm going to pick my dice. There we go. The green die will be on the left. The red die will be on the right. So 3, 2, 3, 6 is our dice set. For every, I'm going to keep track of the individual die and the accumulation of the dice. Okay, so in other words, every time a die we toss, if the left die ends up on axis, we're going to use a green chip in the corresponding tray. If it's a off axis throw, we're going to use a red chip. So for instance, on the left die, 3, 2, 4, 5 will be a green chip. A 1 and a 6 will be a red chip. On the right die, the 3, 6, 4, 1 will be a green chip. A 2 and a 5 will be a red chip. Okay, so that's the start. Now, we are also going to use white, black, and purple chips. If both die end up on axis, we're going to put a white chip on the corresponding number. And if it's a hard way, we're going to put it down here in the hard way slot. Okay? But with this dice set, we should only have, if they're both on axis, only the hard 6, hard 8 should be getting the white chip. Okay? If we get a hard 10, we have to have one on, one off. So that would be a white chip is both die are on axis. A black chip is one on axis, one off axis. Purple chip is both die end up off axis. It's a lot to absorb, but we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to keep track of how many throws by my counter. We're going to try to get 50 throws and see what we can do. Let's get to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the test die like right here. I don't know if does that show up? Yeah, barely. Okay, so that we can easily tell when we're on or off die or off axis. Okay, so let's see here. Turn on my light on my throwing station. Activate my counter. Okay, dice are out. 3, 2, 3, 6. That is a 156. 156. We're not worried about keeping track of points or points won or anything like that. Or 7 outs. We just want to mark what we do. So, the left die, the green die, that was an off-axis throw. So that's going to get a red chip in the left tray. Okay? The red die, a 5 was thrown. That is also off-axis. So that gets a red chip. So both die were off-axis. That is a purple chip on the 6. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. That is a 167. 167. Turn those around just so the green die was a 1. That's going to be a red chip because that was off axis. Red die is going to get a green chip because the 6 is on axis. So we had 1 on, 1 off. That is a black chip on the 7. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Three, 6, 9. 3, 6, 9. Turn those around. So the green chip or the green die, that was on axis. Red die, that was on axis. Both die on axis. White chip goes on the 9. What this exercise does is help you see which die is going off axis more. And also, if you're throwing in general on or off axis. So you can decide whether you want to use a hardway set or some other combination. That's a 4, 6, 10. 4, 6, 10. So green die was on axis. Red die was on axis. Both get a green chip. The 10 is going to get a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. We have a leaner on the back wall. So if the back wall wasn't there, it would fall to a 5, okay? So we have another 7. The green chip is on axis. The red chip is off axis. Yeah, okay. So we have 1 on, 1 off. That is another black chip on the 7. 3, 2, 3, 6, dice are out. That is a 1, 5, 6, 1, 5, 6. Just turn these around, just so it makes it more consistent with seeing what's going on. The green die was off axis, that gets a red chip. The red die was off axis, that gets a red chip. Both die off axis, the 6 gets a purple chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. One, 5, 6. 1, 5, 6. So, green die, it was off axis again. It's a red chip. Red die, it's also off axis, gets a red chip. 6 with both die off axis, it's another purple chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. That is a hard 8, a 44 square pair. Both dice double pitched. So green die was on axis, it gets a green. Red die was on axis, that gets a green. The 8 is going to get a white chip. And it's going to get put down here on the hard way. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Six, 3, 9. 6, 3, 9. So the green die was off axis, red chip. Red die on axis, green chip. So 1 on, 1 off, that's a black chip, goes on the 9. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. That is a 2, 1, 3, craps 3. Spin these around. We have on the green chip, that is a on axis, so they get a green chip, a green die. I'm sorry, red die is a 1, that is a green chip also. So both die on axis. That is a white chip, goes down here on the 3. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Six, 1, 7, 6, 1, 7. Really a bummer. We're throwing more sevens than we normally do on this dice set. But that's the thing about throwing dice. It changes every time. So the green die was off axis. That's a red chip. Red die was on axis. That gets a green chip. One on, one off. That's a black chip on the 7. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. That is a 2, 3, 5. 2, 3, 5. Green die. It's on axis, so this gets a green. Red die on axis gets a green. Both die are on axis. The 5 is going to get a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Three, 1, 4. 3, 1, 4. Green die on axis. Red die on axis. Both die on axis. The easy 4 is going to get a white chip. Three, 2, 1, 3. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Two, 5, 7. 2, 5, 7. Well, we're consistently on the 7s for sure. Turn those around. Green die on axis. Red die off axis. Gonna get a red chip. So 1 on, 1 off. Black chip goes on the 7. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Three, 4, 7. 3, 4, 7. Finally, a 7 with both die being on axis. So, green die, green chip, red die, green chip. Both die on axis gets a white chip. Too many 7s, but it does tell you that we're not throwing on axis for the 7s. So we're not getting a lot of double pitches, except this one. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. 6, 5, yo, 6, 5, yo. Green die is off axis, that gets a red chip. Red die is off axis, that gets a red chip. Both die off axis, the yo gets a purple chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Five, 6, yo. Got a repeater on that yo. But this time, both die were on axis. So the green die was on axis, green chip. Red die on axis, green chip. Both die on axis. Yo gets a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. 4, 2, 6. 4, 2, 6. Green die on axis. Red die off axis. 1 on 1. That's a black chip. On the 6. And it came easy. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Hard 10. Hard 10. So the green die was off axis, red chip. Red die, I'm sorry, green die was on axis, so that's a green chip. Red die was off axis, red chip. 1 on, 1 off. The hard 10 gets a black chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Five, 6, yo. 5, 6, yo. Green chip was on axis. Red chip was on axis. Both on axis. That's a white chip. Goes back down here on the yo. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. 4, 2, 6. 4, 2, 6. Green die on axis. Red die off axis. 6 is going to get a black chip. Came easy with 1 on, 1 off. 3, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Hard 4, hard 4, also known as the ballerina because it's a 2-2. Okay, so green die on axis, green chip. Red die off axis, red chip. Hard 4, 1 on, 1 off. The hard 4, going to get a black chip. It's the only way with this dice set to get a hard 4. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. That is a 6, 6, 12 midnight. So, green die was off axis, gets a red chip. Red die on axis, green chip. So 1 and 1, the 12 is going to get a black chip. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Five, 4, 9. 5, 4, 9. Green die on axis, green chip. Red die on axis, green chip. 9 is going to get a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Hard 6, hard 6. 33. Both die are on axis, so they're both going to get a green chip. White chip goes on the hard 6. Three, 2, 3, 6. That's halfway through our tosses. Dice out. Two, 4, 6. 2, 4, 6. Move this over. There we go. So the green chip was, or green die, I'm sorry, was on axis. Red die was on axis. The 6 came easy, but it's still going to get a white chip. That's the first one of those we've had. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. 257, 257. Green die on axis, red die off axis. So the 7 came with 1 and 1, that's another black chip. It's telling me I'm not, you know, as far as the 7s, I am not throwing on axis. So this might not be a good set for me, but I tell you one thing, I sure do like hitting those 6s. 3, 2, 3, 6, dice are out. That is another hard 6. 33. Gonna have to grab some more green chips out of my rack here. So the green die was on axis, red die on axis. The 6 gets another hard 6, gets a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Hard 8. Wow, that's the first 8 we've thrown, period. That's amazing. Well, the second one, I'm sorry. We did have another hard way. So, double pitch on both die, but they were both on axis. Hard 8 gets a white chip. I'm going to move this over on this tray because I ran out of room in on my greens for the green die. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. Four, 3, 7. 4, 3, 7. We're throwing way too many 7s. Again, this isn't an experiment on the 7s. This is an exercise to see if we're throwing on or off axis. Green die on axis, double pitch. Red die on axis. The 7 gonna get a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. That is a 3, 2, 5. Got a back wall leaner on the red die, but if the wall wasn't there, it would fall to a 2. So, green die, green chip. Red die, red chip. 1 and 1, the 5 is going to get a black chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Three, 6, 9. 3, 6, 9. Green die, green chip. Red die, green chip. Both die on axis. 9 is going to get a white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. 6, 2, 8. First 8 that came easy. Green die gets a red chip. Red die gets a red chip. The 8, easy 8, gets a purple chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. 3, 6, 9. 3, 6, 9. Green die, green chip. Red die, green chip. Gonna have to move that over also. The 9 is going to get a white chip. I'm gonna have to restock my white chips down here. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. 2, 1, 3. Craps 3. Green die, green chip. Red die, green chip. Both die on axis. White chip. It's one number we haven't thrown. That is the aces. Dice are out. 3, 2, 3, 6. One, 3, 4. 1, 3, 4. So the 4 came easy. Green die is a red chip. Red die is a green chip. 1 and 1. Black chip on the 4. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. 2, 1, 3. Another craps 3. This time, both die are on axis. Green die on, green chip. Red die, green chip. White chip on the 3. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice are out. 2, 3, 5. 2, 3, 5. Green die, green chip. Red die, green chip. White chip goes on 5. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Four, 1, 5, 4, 1, 5. Okay, green die, green chip. Red die, green chip. 5 gets another white chip. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Six, 2, 8. 6, 2, 8. Green die, red chip. Red die, red chip. Both off axis. Purple chip. Okay, we're down to our last 10 throws. Let's see what we can do. 3, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Three, 4, 7, 3, 4, 7. Double pitch. Green die, green chip. Red die, green chip. Both die on axis. White chip on the 7. Way too many 7s. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Four, 5, 9, 4, 5, 9. Green die, green chip. Red die, red chip. It's 1 and 1. The 9, it's a black chip. Dominant numbers. 6 and 9. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. Six, 2, 8, 6, 2, 8. Green die, red chip. Red die, green chip. No, I'm sorry, red chip. Both die off axis. The 8 gets a purple chip. Three, 2, 3, 6, dice out. 1, 6, 7. I just cannot go very far without throwing a 7. Green die is a red chip. Red die is a green chip, so it's 1 and 1. The 7 is going to get another black chip. 9 sevens. Wow. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Six, 1, 7. 6, 1, 7. Unbelievable. Green die, red chip. Red die, green chip. 1 and 1. Black chip. Just thinking too much about the sevens, it's just starting to, subconsciously is what it's producing. So we need to change that. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Hard 10. Hard 10. Green die is going to be a green chip. Red die is going to be a red chip. 1 and 1. The hard 10 is going to be a black chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Five, 2, 7. 5, 2, 7. Green die, green chip. Red die, red chip. 1 and 1. 7 gets a black chip. Oh, man, just way too many. Pick a number when you're throwing anything but the 7 so that you erase it from your consciousness. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. Doesn't matter whether it hits it or not, it's just what your mind is thinking. 4, 2, 6. 4, 2, 6. Green die, green chip. Red die, red chip. 1 and 1. The 6 is going to get a black chip. Three, 2, 3, 6. 2 more tosses and we'll be done. Dice are out. That is a 1, 2, 3, craps 3. Green die, red chip. Red die, red chip. 3 gets a purple chip. Last toss. 3, 2, 3, 6. Dice out. One, two, three. Craps 3. See a horn, bet a horn, as they say. So, green die, red chip, red die, red chip. Both die off axis gets a purple chip. That's 50 throws. Just out of curiosity, let's see where we end up here. 20 as far as on axis, off axis. Okay. The left die $34. Make sure we have 16 here in this. And we do. So 34 out of 50. You would expect on axis 2/3 of the time, right? Because it's a 6-sided cube. 2/3 would be 67%. And what I say we had 34. So that would be a 68. So we're right on as far as the math in general terms. Red die, we're a little bit under the math. We're at 29, so that's 58% on the red die. So that means the red die was going off axis a little bit more than the right die. Okay, we have 21 on that, on the off axis. Make sure that's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, okay. 29 and 21. So those match. How many 2s did we have? We had no 2s. 3s, we had 5 3s. 2 of those being both off axis. 3 of those being both on axis. 4s, we had one toss with both of them being on axis, 2 of them with one on, one off, with one hard way. 5s, we had 4 5s, 3 of them being with both on axis, one being one on, one off. 6s, we had 2 hard ways. 2 being both off, or 3 being both off. 3 being one on, one off, and 1 being both on. So that was like a 4-2, or a 2-4, I'm sorry. So 6, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 6s. That's not a bad result. But our 7s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 7s. But only 3 of those were both double pitches. So, you know, it kind of weird. Wait, 11 sevens out of 50. That's less than what, every fourth rows. That's just crazy. Or every, yeah, well, say 5 throws. Between 4 and 5. Okay, 8s. We had 2 hard ways and 3 off axis, both of them being off axis. So that would be a 5 or a 6-2. Yeah, it had to be a 6-2. Okay, 9s. We had 5 9s. Or no, 6 9s, I'm sorry. Both on axis, 4 on, both on. 2 both off. 10s, we had 2 hard ways and 1 with both on. 11s, we had 3 yos, 1 with both off and 2 both on. So that means this was a 6-5 is the purple, and the white would be a 5-6. 12s, we had 1 12. Okay, so what does this tell us? Dominant numbers on this set for at least this session were the 6, 7, and 9. On axis, let's see what we had here for total on axis. So for out of 50 throws, we had 22 on axis, which is 44%. That's not bad, I don't think. Off axis, 1 on, 1 off. We had 19, which is 38%. Both off axis, we have 9. So a little over 40%. That's, I would say, from when I first started, that's probably pretty close. Again, this is just a cursory examination of this set of throws, but it gives you an idea of, if you do this, okay, you know, consistently, you can see if you're throwing on or off axis, which I think is a, you know, if you believe in dice control, you probably believe in some type of on axis throwing. A lot of people have got an off axis set, and their method of throwing, which is like, say, the what is it? It's the chopper, which is a stacked set, something like that, to where you're throwing it with a twist like that, or some people throw it actually, or a Yuri set. Some people think that a Yuri is throwing off of the edges, like a par toss, but it's coming like that. Some people say it's a more of a rolling like that. Doesn't really matter. Try to find a dice set that works for you, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button, share it with a friend, leave a comment. By the way, I want to thank all the new subscribers for coming in. It's always nice to look back and see that we plateaued right about 300. We're sitting at 309 the last time I checked, so appreciate everybody. And for all you returning subscribers, really appreciate you continuing to watch. So till next time, we're going to start a new series for the month of July with a $500 bankroll and see what we can do. All right? So till then, everybody take care, stay safe, and God bless.